Ladies and gentlemen, what's up? This is BC. Welcome back to another episode of Supreme Being. Huge shout out to Team BC, my nationwide real estate team. Love you guys. If you're interested in joining, join teambc.com. Shout out to Modern Success, my movement, my coaching program, BRYAN to check that out and join, or anything else that I offer as an individual, as a businessman, and as a coach. So let's get into today's episode. A lot is going on, right? A lot is going on. And as we continue on the podcast, this is going to be more of an observational episode. I'm going to speak about some things just that I notice in people, have noticed in myself at times, and things that I think, as I'm being reminded, as new information is coming in, new knowledge is coming in, some things I can give as new, some things I can give as reference and say, hey, I would have done this differently, or I would have done this better. Okay. First thing I want to talk about is this. I continuously have realizations about this, right? But it's just something that has become evident to me now that I'm, 35 years old, and I've done a lot with my life, and I've made drastic, massive changes in my life. And it's one of those moments where I'm reflecting, okay, overall for people, right? There's a very misrepresented understanding and misinterpretation of whenever you decide to make a change or do something, right? Whether it's career, personal, or anything in between. People, again, they don't look at the time aspect of things correctly. And what I mean by that is, let's say somebody comes to me, right? And this is a simple example, and they want to get into real estate, right? I'm very clear with people, and I lay it out for them in a very raw way, and basically let them know, you may have success quickly. You may, but odds are, and statistically, mathematically, you will not make a lot of money early on, maybe first year or two, right? That's just the facts, because that's the vast majority of people. Are there a small percentage that have success right away and are superstars? Sure, but that's a very small percentage. Even me, relatively speaking, I did very well, probably top something percent. I still wasn't balling after a year or two. It really took that third, fourth year, then expanding into my team to really start hitting what I consider like significant money, right? The ability to not live paycheck to paycheck, right? That took some time. So when I say people have a misunderstanding of the amount of time and the concept of time, I'm referring to an example like that. Somebody wants to make a change or do something, yet they come in and expectations are not clear, right? Now, in this case, like I just gave you the example, I tell them, yet they're still not an understanding. They're listening and they claim to acknowledge it. And think about this in your life for a second. You listen, you claim to acknowledge it, but when the time comes and you're faced with that reality, it's almost like you forgot about that and you don't want to believe it, right? They'll message me 2 weeks later, oh my God, this is so hard. And I'm looking at them like, dude, I told you, I literally gave you the proper expectations to have, and you chose not to use them and understand them and believe them. And you went back to your default programming, right? So I think at every level and to varying degrees, that's going to happen no matter what, right? Because of course, innately we want to make change. We want to do it faster. We want to be better. That's just the way we are. I think we're wired for that in a sense as human beings, because we don't like to suffer. We don't like to not be good at things. We don't understand the, like things like the 10,000 hour rule and all these other concepts that we can readily observe, yet in the moment, because we are emotional creatures and part animalistic, we don't want to, believe it, or it's something that we're just like, oh, why does it have to be this way, right? But I'm bringing that up because, many of you who message me, many of you who listen to this podcast, if you seek right now to bridge this gap that you have with this concept of time, right? You'll have a lot more peace in your life, and you'll be able to operate at a higher level consistently for longer by understanding this and knowing that every day that you stay committed and do what you're supposed to do, you're one step closer to actualizing what it is. Because what's on the other end of it, although we have goals, like I want X amount of money, I want this type of lifestyle, I want this freedom, right? Even though we have those specific target goals, this isn't finite. This process never stops. So we have goals along the way and these actual numbers and things that we go for. But what I'm saying is it's not finite. You will always be engaged in this process where something that you're doing with your life will require a very high time investment, right? Because then once you achieve that or hit a certain level and whatever that is, the next thing will be on the horizon, and the next thing and the next thing, because that's just, again, how we are as human beings. We're always dedicating our lives and time to something. Because if we're going to use that construct of time, 24 hours in a day, right? 60 minutes in an hour, right? 60 seconds in a minute, your time is on something, right? Now, when we default and we get into things that don't feed our purpose, aren't aligned with where we want to go, like we play video games or bullshit on Netflix, right? That starts to work against you, because now you're dedicating yourself to something that is mindless and not good for you. And because you're spending so much time on it, your existence becomes more and more of that, and you become less whole, not happy, right? You don't feel like you're progressing, but all you got to do is step back and say, where's the vast majority of my time, dedication, and investment being put? Is it being purposeful from a cause point, or am I simply being the effect, right? Because that's one degree of it. This next degree is, like we discussed in the beginning, now when I'm putting my time towards something, am I being understanding of the amount of time that's going to be required to really embark on this journey and start to climb that mountain, right? Mount Everest, if you want to call it that, right? Because like when I got into real estate, obviously I had to learn sales. I never had done sales. I never had been involved in anything like it. I was a basketball player, right? As my communication went as far as being a leader. And I think I drew upon whatever little ability I had naturally, which in communication, I think was very little. I was never really a talker or a social butterfly when I was younger. It just drew because of my competitiveness, my drive to win in basketball and everything. Like that's something people will tell you. I'm very competitive, right? We can play a pickup basketball game and I'll be yelling at you if you miss a layup because I want to win, dude. I don't want to lose. Almost to the point back in the day where it was detrimental, because even I'd be playing video games and like yelling at the TV and throwing the controller. Definitely that shit was out of control back in the day, right? I've changed that a lot and channeled that energy in a much more controlled way. But back in the day, it was just oozing, right? It was almost like the cup that overflow, right? Of just that competitiveness, right? But like I really was somebody who, when I put my time in something, right, I looked at it a different way, right? I looked at it a different way, but I think a better level understanding of this was always in me. Meaning, when I looked at something, I knew that it would take time. So if we go back to the example of me being an athlete and all that, then never having done sales and having to get into real estate, although I knew it would sting and I still was disconnected a bit, in the back of my mind, I had already talked to myself and drilled myself so much that, look, dude, you're brand new at this. There's going to be a big suffering period before you really get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm getting this now and I'm having fun. I knew that was on the horizon. I knew it was there. I like the end of the rainbow, but I'm like, it's going to take some time to walk there. So as I'm going door to door, I'm making calls and learning everything that has to do with entrepreneurship and finances and real estate. Like, I still suffered and made myself suffer a little bit too much in excess, but I still was intelligent enough, right? And grounded enough to say, dude, you just did a complete 180 in your life. This is not going to be simple. I don't care whether you have a lot of natural ability or not. And I don't think I did when it came to sales and communication. I believe I'm one of the people probably on the bottom portion of the ladder in regards to natural talent when it came to that, right? If you, some of you may be listening to this like, dude, I admire you as a communicator. There's no way. Well, this was built. This was by effort and practice and work and time investment and money and all this other stuff to get to where I'm at as a communicator and as a speaker and as a person and coach and all that, right? Nothing was given to me. This was earned, right? So back then, I knew what I was starting with. I wasn't the guy that you would point at and say, oh, this dude's going to be a superstar. It wasn't until people saw my effort and dedication and discipline and commitment, all those intangibles, right, that anybody can have, but that I displayed at a high level. That's when people said, oh, this dude's going to be a rock star, right? So I was wise enough, we can say, and slightly patient enough, even though I was still impatient, right? Which we'll probably talk about today too, to know that, dude, this is going to be a massive, massive, massive time investment. Now, again, as simple as that sounds, we still fool ourselves. We fool ourselves. We really do. because you may think like, oh, no, I get that. No, you don't, because there's still places in your life, and it could be different categories. Maybe it's your diet, health, and lifestyle. Maybe it's the relationships that you're building, right? Maybe it is building your business. Maybe it's managing your finances. Maybe it's your personal development, your confidence, your self-esteem, your process with yourself that you're just not having a proper reality on, because you have to really unpack this logically. If you've been patterned a certain way emotionally for however old you are, 20, 30, 40, 15, right? 59, listening to this, that is that many years and that much time doing things a certain way. Of course, making a change, right? You're not going to go from 30 years of doing something a certain way to within a week or two suddenly changing, right? You may make changes quickly, but again, we have to be intelligent with this thing, and we have to look at it realistically, right? Like, I know our emotions get in the way, but you have to take a step back and say, okay, am I really trying to take 30 years of me being a certain way and just rewire it in a week? When you look at that, it brings proper perspective and reality to it, and it grounds you a little bit. Then you'll be less susceptible, knowing that and looking at it and actually understanding it. You'll be less susceptible to all these get rich quick schemes and all that, because that's all that is, and that's why it works. People have become out of touch with like reality and looking at that with just common sense, that they'll look and listen to something that sounds appealing, like fix 30 years of problems in a day, and they'll actually entertain it and believe it. Although I still believe deep down inside, they have a tremendous amount of skepticism, and they're just operating from an emotional state or literally just out of desperation, but they still know it's not going to work. And that's why those things never do work, because you don't even believe that they're going to work, right? But I believe not having proper perspective on the subject and understanding, right, and taking the time to really just look at it from the outside for a second, that's what causes people to fall into those traps, or at least be susceptible to them, right? Now, this also helps you emotionally, right? It may take some of the sting off of it, because you're still going to be affected emotionally. Absolutely, right? That's just human nature. As much as we are a higher level intelligence and consciousness and awareness, we're still grounded in this primal animalistic body, right? That in many cases and in many forms is very similar to animals. We just possess that superpower that they don't, which is intellect, right? So when the more I looked at this and just understood it and approached it from, like, for lack of better words, just as an adult, a mature adult, again, it allowed me to navigate those emotions and maybe slight ups and downs before I got a hold of those and mastered really emotions. It helped me navigate them a little bit better, because there's going to be days and times that, you know, emotionally you're just off, which is another point I can talk about. There's going to be days where you're just off, man, emotionally, for whatever reason, right? Our society, our diet, our lifestyles, they just don't, they aren't synonymous and harmonious with a peaceful, good, emotionally stable, grounded human existence. I mean, it just doesn't work that way, right? You look at phones and all the shit people share, what they put on the news, right? People around us, and how the average person's always talking negative. I mean, I could go on and on. The imagery around us, all the marketing, right? Poor water quality, air quality in a lot of places, right? Poor food. I know I brought that up, but you get what I'm saying? It doesn't really contribute to us being sharp, right? Because if I can attribute one thing that helped me a lot with my emotional state, which is really cleaning up my diet. You guys know I'm more extreme. I'm like an alkaline, almost raw, plant-based, right? It's even like beyond vegan, right? With my crazy teas and herbal teas and all that stuff. But hey, it allows me to operate like a rock star, energy levels, focus, you know, emotional state management, operating at a high level. Now, is that the only thing? No. Done a lot of mental work too, which I think is superior. But I know that I'm in this carnal suit. I'm going to have to optimize this suit as much as possible. And I'm going to do what I have to do, even if it's not popular, right? Or approved or understood by most people. I'm still going to do what I have to do to optimize this thing, because this allows me to think clear, to think at a higher level, to use my logic and be more focused, right? It just optimizes what I'm doing, and it enhances my life and my ability to do these things. So we brought up, you know, time and realizing it. That's why I knew when I got in, growing a nationwide team, growing my social media, growing my real estate business solo, and then turning into a team, all that stuff is going to take time, dude. It was going to take years and years and years and years. So when I made my plans, I didn't plan for 6 months or a year, like most people do their business plans and life plans. I looked at the next 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. What is that going to look like, right? Once step one is achieved, what is step two going to look like in 3 and 4 and 5, right? So when you start doing that, you take this time equation in the proper perspective and you start really utilizing your mind at a higher level. And that's really what it's about, right? I don't want to operate from emotion. I want to operate from logic and reason and higher level intellect. That's where I want to be most of the time. My emotions are going to be my emotions, and there's a bazillion things in this world that will trigger a million different types of emotions. And in many cases, I don't have control over that. I may have control about situations and people that I put myself in front of and environments, but I need to focus on my reactions to those things and master those. But as much as possible, I want to put things in the right place to maximize these potential things that will have an effect on me, and put the right things in front of me that will trigger the proper emotions and best things, not the negative ones, right? But again, we have control over that. We have control over that. So as we look at this subject more, right? Hey, man. Got my cat, 1 second. Crazy Sphinx cats. Anyways, if you guys didn't know, I have 2 Sphinx cats, and sometimes when they want my attention and I'm doing the podcast and stuff, you know, on video for longer than 30 minutes or an hour, they get a little impatient. Anyways, as we were continuing, right? So we brought up time, right? Another one I brought up is patience, but I've talked about that before. I don't really want to talk about that specifically right now. As we're winding down, we got about 5 minutes left, and, you know, I want to wrap this thing up and keep it powerful for you. But if anything, I'll leave you with this. I'll leave you with this. For those of you who maybe don't create like I do, you don't have podcasts and things of that nature, what I do recommend that you do is, you know, as you're living your life, right, throughout your day, I don't care if you listen to this and you work a 9 to 5, you're an entrepreneur or anything in between. When you're living your life, I always recommend people have, you know, pencil and pen, or pen, whichever you prefer, preferably a pencil, and some paper around them. Because if you're somebody who is engaging more in using your logic and reason in your mind, right, and not being used by it, thoughts and ideas, you know, observations that you make, they pop in your head. Start writing them down. Because when you start writing down stuff like we discussed today and some of these observations that are coming up in your mind, you now will see not only what you're focused on and what your mind is producing, and then be able to change it and influence it, but it's a way to put more focus and awareness on this superpower that human beings have. And the more attention and focus that you put on it and more awareness, the more it enhances. Now your mind really starts working more efficiently like it's supposed to, right? So in past episodes, when you hear me talk about bringing more awareness and focus into your life, this is one of the things that one of these things that you need to do to enhance this, that maybe we haven't talked about before, because that's one way to do it. One of the most powerful ways to do it, right? And that'll get your mind more primed for ideas and creation and creativity and all the things that you want. It'll be focused on the right things. You'll be aware of the right things. You'll be creating and thinking about and speaking about and having ideas and dreams of the right things, not the wrong things, which is how we start piece by piece, making our lives better, enhancing what we already have. Because again, I've said this a million times to you, and I'll continue to repeat it. I'm not special, right? I'm not some fucking alien or some supercomputer 5,000 IQ dude. I'm not. I'm just somebody who's dedicated their lives now to certain things and concepts and ideas, and constantly learning, voracious reader. And I'm just working on myself and my mindset and my communication and some of these things. And I've dedicated myself to that. And that's why I keep getting better and having success and all this other stuff. It's not some fucking magic formula, right? It's an accumulation of all these things that I've shared with you, plus more and more and more and more, right? But that's my focus. That's what I'm, you know, putting my time and effort on. Even when I shut this off, I don't just come on to talk about this stuff for 20 minutes with you guys and then live a different life, right? Otherwise my results, you know, wouldn't be what they are. But you guys have to start playing with some of these things more and doing some of these simple things that I know sometimes can sound boring, or dang, we're always working on ourselves. Well, yeah, dude, that shouldn't be your reaction. It should be, hell yeah, we're working on ourselves. What else is there to do? The average person isn't working on themselves. They don't care. They hate themselves. I don't want to be in that position. Do you? So do some of these exercises and do some of these simple things, because that's where the change happens, and you'll be in love with who you become. And then you'll embrace these things more and more. Why? You start tracking your progress and seeing the improvements that you're making. And it's really cool, man. You acknowledging yourself is one of the highest forms of praise and one of the best ways to induce proper emotions, good feelings, and all the things that you want, because you're finally giving yourself credit. No credit is worth what your credit means to you. And when I say credit, I mean praise that you're giving yourself. If you give yourself credit, it's more valuable than if the top person on the planet, most respected person on the planet, gave you credit. Why? Because you, to you, are more important and more significant than anybody outside of you. Period, point blank, end of story. Anybody who tells you anything otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about in regards to the subject. Okay? Acknowledge yourself, right? Give yourself praise, but more importantly, give yourself a reason to love yourself and give yourself praise by staying sharp, doing what you're supposed to do, understanding some of these concepts, and employing some of these faculties that human beings have that no other creature on this planet has, because that's what it's about. Okay. So I'll leave you here, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode, more off the cuff, just kind of us chatting. Shout out to Team BC, right? Love you guys. Shout out to Modern Success, my coaching. If you guys want anything from me, Bryan Casella, my website.com. Check it out. And we'll see you on the next episode. Peace.